Welcome to the Game 3 post-game podcast. The Raptors have taken a 2-1 series lead after beating the Indiana Pacers 101-85. It was a blowout. It was a blowout. Make no mistake about it. This was a complete performance from end to end as the Raptors distinguished themselves and took a series lead with pivotal Game 4 coming up in a couple days. Joining me to discuss said game is William Liu.
What's up, guys? I feel great. I feel very good after that win.
There's lots to feel great about, man. That's why. We started off this game as we get right into this, Will. We don't have to do any banter to start the podcast. No banter. DeMar DeRozan started the game 4 or 5 in the first quarter, and immediately Jack Armstrong and Matt Devlin went on well, he's doing this different. He's going north-south instead of east-west, and all kinds of explanations for his 4 or 5. And I'm thinking, he's taking the same shots as the other two games. They're just going in at this point.
I mean, yeah, because the way he ended the game, the rest of the game, he wasn't shooting nearly as well. I mean, like you said, he's shooting the same shots. The first shot he had was a long 2. Second one was a long 2 that I think he got fouled for an and one or something like that. So I think, honestly, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but the Raptors don't really need that much from DeMar DeRozan to win this series.
Yeah. The Pacers are that bad. So game starts. The Raptors take a bit of an early lead. I mean, they're already up for it. I think defensively, that was the first thing I noticed was that DeMarre Carroll started this game ahead of Norman Powell, who didn't get any minutes till the fourth quarter, I think. And immediately he was on Paul George, made an impact right away. A lot of ball pressure up top. Switched a lot. Paul George was a bit shut down. Helped a lot. Caused a lot of steals. Raptors got a lot of points off turnovers. So the impact of DeMarre Carroll for the first time in this series was really felt. He went to 7 for 16, 17 points, plus 13, 5 rebounds. He only has 1 steal credited to him, but really his impact is not reflected by that 1 steal. He was disrupting a lot of things out there. Yeah,
I mean, this is the DeMarre Carroll that the Raptors were expecting when they first signed him to that big contract. He's still not fully healthy, and there are still times where you get quite worried about his knee and stuff like that, but again, when he's up to full speed like he was today, I don't know what they did differently, but he looked much better than he looked in both game 1 and 2, where he looked visibly slower. He looked physically fit, and he was awesome, man. And the way he was getting his offense came within the flow, of his offense. He got 16 shots, which is kind of a lot for DeMarre Carroll, but those I thought they were all good shots, right? Yeah. A lot of open catch and shoot threes. He hit half of his unguarded shots per synergy, so. It's great stuff, man. This and most importantly, the defense against Paul George was excellent. And even the 4 offensive rebounds, that was huge too. He crashed the glass at some key moments, especially in that first quarter there. I think there was 1 possession where he got 2 offensive rebounds. It's good stuff. And even some of his drives were working, which is not necessarily what you necessarily want out of him, but if he gives it to you, it's a nice bonus to have.
It didn't, even though he took 16 shots, watching the game, you didn't feel like he took 16 shots. You know what I mean? It was they were so in rhythm and so not forced that you didn't even notice them. And when they went in, they're oh, there's DeMarre Carroll hitting threes again, which is nice to see. And in a couple of pods ago, we talked about maximizing his time on Paul George. And I think Dwayne Casey did a good job of doing just that. I think whenever Paul George was on, it was a rare occasion when DeMarre Carroll didn't guard him.
Yeah, the only time George sat was sometime in the second quarter. He needed a breather after the first. And as soon as Paul George checked back in midway through the second, you saw DeMarre Carroll come off the bench and shadow George. And George, 6 of 19 shooting, 1 of 8 from deep. He still got 12 free throws, which, but the 12 free throws are a little bit inflated, I'll say that much. The whistle was very friendly to George after he picked up a technical early in the game. Yeah. But he also had 4 turnovers, and he just wasn't that effective. And, And this credit to Carroll for that. Sorry.
And this is like normal coaching. You know what I mean? This is not like we're praising this move when this really should be the default configuration for the Raptors in game 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, these are things that we, like you said, man, we talked about this in the first podcast. It only made sense to match his minutes. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned with Carroll was he supposedly has a time limit, a time constraint. He played 35 minutes.
Everybody talks about that. I don't believe it. I don't think Dwayne Casey's one for time limits, and given DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry's minutes this season.
Yeah. Look, DeMarre Carroll looked great in this game. And whatever, it's the playoffs, man. Forget the time limits in the playoffs. Just play as many minutes as you need to get the win.
Positive. So let's talk about this the second quarter where the Indiana Pacers deployed a all bench unit against essentially the Raptors' most effective starting five, and got immediately destroyed. And their coach was about 5-6 minutes late to notice that, and within that time span, the Raptors built up like a 18-point lead. Was he trying to go small against the Raptors bigs? What was his, put yourself in his position and go, what is he thinking when he's putting that lineup out there? What is he hoping to achieve?
I mean, well, I think this is something we should acknowledge when we talk about with Dwayne Casey. I mean, Dwayne Casey makes some boneheaded errors too, but that doesn't make him necessarily a bad coach. You kind of have to compare it to everything else, because Frank Vogel is a nice coach. I credit Frank Vogel for a lot, but this is the third game in a row now where he's put out an all-bench lineup. And just look at one guy in the bench lineup, Ty Lawson, okay? He's played 37 minutes in this playoff series. He's been minus 24 of those 37 minutes. He's been garbage. He's been minus 8 in each game. And finally, today, he at least got shelved for the second half. But I think the reason Frank Vogel goes to the all-bench lineup is so that he can play his starting lineup as many minutes as possible. He wants to keep that unit intact instead of spreading those minutes around. But every time he goes to the all-bench lineup, that just so happens that that's when the Raptors go to the Lowry plus bench lineup, which is the Raptors' best lineup. And consistently, game after game, the Raptors destroy the Pacers when they go to this all-bench lineup. And by the time they brought in, some starters back in, I think George Hill was the first one to come back in, then Paul George just quickly followed soon thereafter. But by that point, the Raptors had built like a 15, 16-point lead. Yeah. They're really stretching it out. And then they came in, they were cold. And people were flubbing passes. I mean, that was a thing with the Pacers tonight, was just they threw so many awful, awful passes. And credit the Raptors' defense for that too, but they were just completely out of rhythm. And
16 turnovers from the Pacers, only 11 for the Raptors. That was a big change from the first couple of games. Interesting thing here. The Pacers, according to ESPN's box score, played 13 players in this game.
Yeah.
That's possible in the playoffs? I thought it was a 12-man roster.
Well, I mean, they emptied the bench towards the end. Got in Joe Young, Glenn Robinson the third.
But aren't you limited to 12 players on a basketball team, or do you go beyond that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question.
I always thought it was 12. Huh. Well, it's something to look into, man. They played 13 players today, including Glenn Robinson the third.
I'm not gonna be angry if they play Glenn Robinson the third.
All right. So moving on. One guy that we have been praising, and I was watching the Pacers broadcast for the first half before it got cut off, and their whole pregame montage, a build up to the game, was essentially focused on Jonas Valanciunas, on how they will stop this quote unquote giant from Lithuania. I don't know what that what their focus was in stopping JV, but they clearly didn't. He didn't have as strong as an offensive game, 3 for 8, 9 points, but defensively again, 14 points, 1 block, just massive. And it was so evident again for the third game in a row that the Pacers have absolutely nobody that can match up with Jonas Valanciunas. And essentially what they're doing is they're trying, they don't have the strength to box him out and collect the rebound. They got to pick one. So when they box him out, he just goes over top of them and just reaches for the rebound. And when they try to jump with him, he just overpowers them and he goes around them. They just do not have any answer. And at the start of the second half, the Pacers went big to try to counter that. Didn't really work. But overall, JV, man, third game in a row, massive game.
Yeah, huge. Just always a factor on the glass. Part of the reason for that is the Pacers make their bigs help a lot on DeRozan and Lowry's drives, and then once those guys get detached from Jonas's body, Jonas is able to creep into spots, really establish his real estate, and then he's just so big. You saw a rebound that he grabbed in the third quarter where he tipped it 3 or 4 times just to himself, while the Pacers guards were trying to reach up there and get it. He's just so much bigger than these dudes. Yeah, I mean, JV's just a consistent factor, and then you add in the fact that the Pacers are pulling, yanking on his arm, leaning on his shoulder. There's 3 guys on him sometimes, and he's still making an impact on the glass. And he didn't get the ball nearly as much as he did in previous games, and that's fine. Honestly, the Raptors offense wasn't really struggling that much, and they really worked a lot to send help on Jonas's pick and roll. So he's not going to have 25 points again, right? Yeah. But as long as he can be an effective defender, which he has been so far, which has been great, and also just keep possessions alive, and also draw fouls on guys like Miles Turner. Miles Turner was so frustrated. He picked up a technical in the third quarter. Yeah. After replay showed he clearly yanked on JV's arm, and then still complained about the foul, and he got called for tech. But as long as he's a factor on the glass, it's great, because the one thing the Pacers don't have is enough strong wing players or even good stretch bigs where they can force Jonas off the court. Like, other teams can do that, right? They have good stretch forwards. Jonas can't cover in space, and then it becomes a defensive problem. Maybe you pull Jonas. But the thing is, Jonas has been viable against all of the Pacers lineups. There's no way the Pacers can outmatch up Jonas. And so, at this point, it's really just, can Jonas stay out of foul trouble? Because he's been in foul trouble all 3 games.
Yeah, at the start of the third quarter, Jack Armstrong made the comment that he was surprised that the Pacers kind of went big with the Mahimi back in there, and that they should have gone small. And I in my mind thought, well, yeah, theoretically, yes, you could do that, but who would actually pull Jonas out and make us pay? And I look at their roster, other than Miles Turner, who's a nice little player with a good mid-range jumper, they're not really getting any production out of their front line in terms of shooting or scoring of any sort. Mahimi's basically been a bust this series. Up and down the lineup, Jordan Hill's not even playing. I still don't get why not. But so I kind of agreed with the Pacers, at least from their perspective, that going big was a better option for them than going small. But Bismack Biyombo also, same kind of effect as Valanciunas, too strong for any Pacer big. And again, he's like, even though he gives you basically nothing on offense, it's still okay against the Pacers, who really can't make him pay.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with Bismack, right? Like, you almost have to feel really bad for whoever is playing center for the Pacers, because there's just always somebody crashing the glass. And sometimes it's even more than just the bigs. I mean, because of how much attention they commit to guys like JV and guys like Bismack, you got guys like Carroll flying in there for 4 offensive rebounds. Kyle Lowry had 2 offensive rebounds. There's one superhuman rebound in the first quarter where he dove between 3 Pacers players, was horizontal in midair, and then poked it out for a reset. I mean, the Raptors are just absolutely crushing the Pacers on the glass. This game was a little bit closer. They got 15 offensive rebounds, so they're 9, and won the rebounding edge by 7. You saw in previous games, in Game 2, the Raptors out-rebounded them 44-33.
Yeah,
and even in the first game,
the first 2 games, and you don't see anything here that would indicate that trend will change.
Exactly, and that's the thing with Bismack, right? Like, he hurts the offense because there's so little spacing when Bismack is on the court for the guards, but at the same time, Bismack is able to be effective, and he has been effective in all 3 games just because he's been so good around the basket. You see, when Bismack's in the game, there's nobody on the Pacers that can score around the hoop. Yeah. He's been so good on that area. So it's just, no matter, at the end of the day, it boils down to a talent disadvantage. The Pacers don't have enough talent to outweigh, to win the matchups. So Biyombo, whether it's Biyombo, the way he plays, or the way JV plays, they're winning their matchup regardless.
Yeah. And there were a couple of plays that stuck out with me with Bismack in there. I think Solomon Hill made a nice move on the perimeter, drove, and saw Bismack there, and instead of laying it in properly with the proper English, he kind of hurried the shot and hit it way too hard off the glass, and Bismack got the rebound. Bismack on the stat board does not get credited for that, but those kind of plays are basically happening on every other possession where a Raptor big is disrupting the shot, is making the Pacers feel scared. And this series, the more we go into it, it's a bloodbath inside in favor of the Raptors. And the Pacers broadcast was right to worry about to start the game, but let's switch to the refs for a second, man. A lot of complaining by Paul George and the refs in the first half.
Yep.
I think the Pacers picked up, I want to say, 3 technicals in this game overall.
Yep.
At least. And Paul George, right from the get-go, was just taken out. Mentally, he just was complaining to the refs with 3 minutes into the game. I think he was starting mouthing off to the ref, and just completely mentally he was out of it, and you could tell, and it affected his game as well.
Yeah, and I credit Carroll for that too, because the way he played, Paul George was very physical. And sometimes I thought Carroll probably should have been called for a foul, but just like with DeRozan, I mean, at least credit DeRozan for not picking up a technical so far, even though he's also been sort of shorted calls, because, the Pacers really lost their cool. You saw Actually, they might have had 4 technicals. So you saw Paul George get whistled for a technical in the first quarter. Second quarter, Rodney Stuckey decided to kick Patrick Patterson for some reason. That was a technical. Miles Turner got one.
That's as good. That could have been an ejection because it was actually violent conduct by kicking another player.
Completely unnecessary.
When he's walking away.
Yeah. Right. And even Frank Vogel was out there complaining for calls too. I mean, whatever. He's the coach. He's supposed to go to bat for his players. But with Paul George, he has a tendency to do this. I mean, I think the way he's torched the Raptors in games 1 and 2, we kind of think, oh my God, he's like this unstoppable player. But he's not Kevin Durant. He's like a tier level below Kevin Durant. Like he's probably can get to that Durant level, I don't know, 50, 60% of the time, but other times you can really take him out of the game mentally. And it's not like he had a bad game at all. We're talking about a guy who finished with 25, 10, and 6, but he had 4 turnovers, and he just couldn't get the jumper going at all from the outside. He couldn't get separation from Carroll, and he got very frustrated. And towards the end...
Except that the guy has no help.
He has no help. That's true.
He has zero help on the Pacers. On the wings, Monta Ellis, you might think might provide something, but sometimes I feel Monta Ellis is almost too quick for his mind, where he'll make the move, get free, but then kind of contort the jumper or like miss something or do something weird or hurry the shot up.
Yeah.
Long story short, Paul George, he's a very, very talented player, and he's still the best player in the series, I believe. But he has absolutely zero help from the Pacers.
I mean, you look at it, right? Monta Ellis is supposed to be the number 2 option. He goes 3 for 9 today with 13 points. And in previous games, Monte's been a bit lucky with the 3-point shot. He's not a really good 3-point shooter, but he was like 3 or 4 in the first game from deep. Monte's kind of coming back down to earth. And it's the one thing where if it was Monte of 5 years ago, where he comes and flies off that high screen and then attacks the basket, either draws a foul at the rim or he finishes one of those circus layups, Monte doesn't really attack the basket anymore unless it's in transition because he doesn't really have enough burst. He's now like 31. He doesn't have enough burst to finish around a Bismack Biyombo, around a JV. And as long as you sort of stay in front of him and prevent him from getting like a full head of steam going to the basket, you're fine. And I think even the Raptors are starting to solve Paul George a little bit too. You just get physical, you force him off the 3-point line, and then you leave somebody at the rim and you don't send help. You keep a guy at the rim, and especially when Bismack Biyombo's on the court, Paul George has been sort of effectively contained.
And I think even if you do send help, if you send it from somebody like George Hill who's not hitting his shots, or Monta Ellis who's not hitting his shots, you can afford to do that. You can actually afford to send another defender while George is driving. And he was so involved with the referees today, so worried about Carroll that it was almost that he wasn't looking to pass. He had almost had a DeRozan type game where it was like, I got to score. It's not about the pass anymore. In game 1, you saw like in the fourth quarter, he was passing the ball off left and right. He got like 4 assists, I think, off the Raptors. But in this game, he was like shot first, shot second. Passing was like a distant third option because he felt so frustrated by the officials, by Carroll and all that. So it all kind of came together or went against Paul George for this one. A couple of other things the Raptors did differently here, or a couple other stats that kind of jump out from being different, is that the Pacers points off turnovers only 10. They only scored 10 fast break points, which has been their essentially main source of offense in the first 2 games. Today the Raptors took care of the ball, and that really wasn't a factor. Corey Joe again, low turnover game. Kyle Lowry I think had 1 turnover in total. Our ball handling in general for the series, even DeMar DeRozan for that matter, even though he's struggling on offense, our ball handling in general, like in this game, was extremely good.
Yeah, and credit Lowry and Joseph as well, even DeRozan, is because their main weapons on offense is to attack the basket, and it's very hard to avoid fouls when people are swiping and getting down at the ball and everything. But all year long, they've been effective as a driving offense because they don't turn the ball over. And if you look at the Pacers' offense, they only have good offensive games if they're able to open the game up to a full court game. Yeah. So if you limit your turnovers, or if you turn the ball over, make it a dead ball turnover. It's one thing if you're giving the ball up on like a point to wing pass, and then oh my God, suddenly they're taking a coast to coast for a layup. That happens all the time. Yeah. At least make it a dead ball turnover. Only 11 in this game. I think 2 of them were offensive fouls too. So this is great. And on the other hand, the Pacers are usually quite disciplined. They turn the ball over very infrequently, but you saw in this game they had 12 turnovers in the first half, and the Raptors were one who had 17 fast break points. I think points off turnovers. in the first half, and that really, really buried the Pacers because they actually struggle with playmaking despite how many guards they have on the court.
Yeah, and absolutely, man. I can't agree more with that. I mean, I think even though our Kyle Lowry's shooting numbers aren't like superb, 8 for 21, not that bad. DeMarre Carroll 7 for 16. Like they're doing so many other things that it doesn't really matter. And that's been a theme throughout this series is that shooting percentage almost doesn't matter because both teams are shooting like what 40%. The Pacers were at 38%. It's all the other things that you do that matter. And Kyle Lowry again, man. 40 minutes, 21 points, 8 assists, but Jesus, man, some huge shots. The Pacers tried to make a few runs. They got it down to 13 a couple times. I think Paul George missed a 3 that would have cut it to 10 in that third quarter. Other than that, like one surge by the Pacers, which almost cut the lead to 10 if that 3 had gone in, they weren't really close because every time it got to 13, Kyle Lowry had a step back jumper to like pull. Patrick Patterson had a couple of huge shots. Really, like we never gave the Pacers enough that little bump that would have potentially made them make a real run. It almost there was a wall at 13 which they never could crack really.
Yeah, and I was actually quite concerned because in the second half you saw Frank Vogel get quite desperate. He tried a lot of different lineups out there, like you said. He benched Lavoy Allen and started Miles Turner. He tried that look. He kept the starters out there for a long time. He scrapped the bench lineups. And his starters eventually got tired because they were playing the entire second half. And they faded down the stretch. But like you said, the Raptors made a lot of timely shots. And I think this is the only thing I really discredit Dwayne Casey for from this game was that he stuck, even after Frank Vogel went to Miles Turner, he stuck with Louis Scola in the starting lineup in the third quarter for a very long time. And it got very dicey. But at the same time, the Raptors hit a number of clutch threes. I mean, even Louis Scola, who I just slandered, he hit 1 3 in the third quarter that really like pushed them back a little bit. DeMarre Carroll had 2 big threes, I thought, 1 in the third, 1 in the fourth, that really kept the Pacers at bay. But I think when the Raptors go back and look at that tape, they have to realize if the Pacers are going to go make this switch, then you have to match quicker than what Dwayne Casey did because Dwayne left that lineup out there for 6 straight minutes. A timeout was called. And then came right back with Scola, and it's not a slight against Scola. Like he's been a great guy, he's been a great veteran, but he's just outmatched in these. And I think that the Pacers actually missed a couple of shots they should have hit. But yeah, I mean, otherwise it's a solid game. Look, the Raptors led by like more than 10 for like the entire game.
Yeah, and the Scola thing, I hear you. The game was so wide, even though it was like a 13, 14-point game, you kind of even knew that even if the Pacers somehow got it to under 10 or 8 or 7, they just didn't have it on the night to sustain it all the way through and see it, especially the way Kyle Lowry and DeMarre Carroll and Patrick Patterson were going. It just wasn't happening. But like one thing you realize like throughout this game is that the Raptors get these pockets of contribution from different players at different times. Like Terrence Ross, we haven't talked about at all, only played 10 minutes, but when he was in there, he had 2 big shots in that first quarter. So even though his stat line is not impressive, when he was in there, he contributed. We talked about every other player here. When they were in there, they weren't just dead weight. Even Louis Scola, who we were kind of slandering, had that big 3. Like if you look at all the players the Raptors had out there, Powell played like 3 minutes and DeLon Wright got in for a 1, but ignore them. Everybody here had a contribution when they were in. Nobody was a write-off when they were in there.
Yeah, that's true, and that's true. That's kind of the way the Raptors were in the regular season, too. It's just that they have like a solid bedrock of offense that they're going to get from Lowry, they're going to get from DeRozan. And I thought that this is probably what you would normally expect game to game from Lowry and DeRozan. Not necessarily quite efficient shooting, but 21 points on about 21 possessions each, that's okay, right? But because of how much attention the defense is giving them, you need other people to step up around them. And you saw JV step up in both games 1 and 2. I thought he was good in this one too. He just didn't get the ball as much. But you saw DeMarre Carroll was the one today that really came in, gave some offense. Corey Joseph, and he's been so good in the playoffs. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, he's scoring on Monte Ellis. He's scoring on Rodney Stuckey. He's definitely scoring on Ty Lawson. They almost are running out of defenders to defend both him and Corey and Lowry and DeRozan. They just don't have enough defenders to match all those guys.
It's getting ridiculous.
And even Patrick Patterson, man, his defense in the first half was just, it's amazing. It's Patrick Patterson's defense. It's not Draymond level in terms of quality, but in terms of style, in terms of it being able to switch out on so many possessions, make help rotations, grab rebounds, cause deflections. I mean, Patrick Patterson has just been a godsend for the Raptors for 2-3 months now.
And with Patterson, we don't talk about him enough because he kind of blends into the play, is that whenever you have guys on the court, you always have to worry about a mismatch potentially going against them. For example, you don't want DeMar DeRozan guarding Paul George, or you don't want Kyle Lowry switched over to a bigger guy. With Patrick Patterson, you don't have to worry about that. You can, whenever he's involved in a play, you can afford to switch, or you can afford to let him have that. You can afford to send him for help, knowing that he's quick enough to recover. He's that wild card on defense that Dwayne Casey has at his disposal, and he's being used very effectively because, as you said, he's all over the map. Yeah, Corey Joseph, man, fully agree. I don't know what the Pacers can do. It's almost like they know what's coming. The drive is coming. He's gonna pull back 2 steps and then put his head down and drive left or right and finish over your big, and there's nothing you can do about it because your perimeter defense is that bad. When you know what's coming and you still can't stop it, that's a sign of a glaring weakness on your team. And the Pacers' wing defense, other than Paul George, is just sad. Everybody there is just sad.
I think they're just running out of guys. I mean, George Hill and Paul George are doing great jobs, and they're working their asses off to stop DeRozan and Lowry. But then who you got left for Corey Joseph, right? Yeah. Ty Lawson, he's just way too small, and he's kind of checked out. Defensively, he's pretty suspect, just in general. And Corey Joseph's having whatever he wants. Even against bigger defenders, there's one drive where Corey Joseph comes into the game in the fourth quarter, draws 3 defenders in the paint, and then kicks it out to Patrick Patterson, wide open for 3. If he's going to break down the man at the front, it's pretty simple, right? If he's going to break down his man, they need to send help, and if they send help, he finds open shooter. He's such a willing passer as well. All 3 games, every time Corey Joseph comes in the game, there's a positive outcome. And if you talk about a guy off the bench who can consistently come off the bench and give you positive production, it's invaluable. Invaluable, man.
And the only thing the Pacers haven't tried on him yet is that they haven't tried to put a small forward on him, or someone like C.J. Miles or somebody like that. They haven't attempted. They're basically sticking with Monta Ellis or George Hill or Ty Lawson, or one of those 3 basically. And obviously it's not been working out. Maybe in Game 4 you'll see a switch where they try somebody bigger on there. That's all I can think of, because 3 games in a row he's just destroyed them. And in this one he was 10 points, 5 for 10 shooting, but just cutting their defense like a hot knife through butter overall. Yeah. So that's Corey Joseph for you. I don't know, Will. There were a couple of other plays of note that kind of stick out for me. One was that JV had this play where I think the one you mentioned earlier, where he tipped the ball to him and he got the offensive rebound and he kicked it off, and he was expecting a repost after he passed it to DeMar DeRozan. And DeRozan went the other way.
And, of course he does. DeRozan does not like to pass to JV.
And even Jack Armstrong was like, you got to give it back to him at that point. He's worked so hard for that rebound. DeRozan scored on the ensuing play. Don't get me wrong. He did. But you got to dump that back to JV out there, because he didn't have as many shot attempts as you would like to see.
Hey, you noticing how he's not afraid. The coach in him, he's seeing the plays that DeRozan's not making, and he's calling it out. And I think that's very refreshing, because throughout the year, you can definitely tell how they're apologetic for DeRozan in a way that they're not necessarily the same for other players, which is, it's fine. You're not really going to go out there and kill your star player all the time. He's going to have a bad game once in a while. But in the playoffs, you're seeing Jack say, DeRozan, he's got to make the pass here. You can't be forcing the shot here. I'll feed JV if he's going to get the rebound. Again, he scored, so whatever. But my general thing with DeRozan is, in this series, you don't really need DeRozan to win. In fact, having less of DeRozan taking over the offense is actually better for the team.
Yeah, and case in point was at the start of the fourth quarter. The game, it was a 12-point lead at the start of the fourth, and he took out DeRozan and he put in Kyle Lowry, who was having just an amazing game even up to that point. And he put in Joseph, Lowry, Patterson, Carroll, and Biyombo to start that fourth quarter. And he didn't bring in DeRozan until 6.5 minutes left in the fourth. And he didn't even need to, because at that point the lead had ballooned from 12 to 18, and that was essentially game. And in that stretch, Kyle Lowry hit 2 huge jumpers. One was that 20-footer, like a step back, and then when the play wasn't going anywhere, he'd step back for a 25-footer. It's those kind of match-winning plays, game-winning plays that Lowry's been made. So credit to Dwayne Casey for taking DeRozan out, going with Lowry, Carroll, and three bench guys. And that was essentially the winning lineup for me in that fourth quarter, which iced the game. And also, Kyle Lowry, I don't think we talk about him enough, man, because he like MVP for this game. Yeah, Jonas had a massive game again. He was huge on the boards, but heart and soul of this team, man, Kyle Lowry yet again.
Yeah, this is what you expect to see out of Lowry. I mean, that's again one of the big differences between DeRozan and Lowry is that when the shot isn't falling for DeRozan, he's not bringing a lot to the table. But even when the shot's not falling for Lowry, I thought in the game one he still made some nice defensive plays, and his defense has really steadily gone better and better. The only thing I would say about Lowry in this game that I thought was a little bit dicey was he would occasionally overhelp. So he would really try to beat the rotation, and like when the ball gets swung from one side to the other, it usually goes through a big in the post or on a roll or something. And Lowry was sending a lot of help to that big and leaving his man George Hill open. George Hill is a really good spot up shooter, a catch and shoot guy. So as I understand what Lowry's trying to do, he's a very good, very very good help defender. It's just that he needs to pick his rotations a little bit better. But I mean, otherwise, man, he's making so many extra plays. He's getting in there. He's getting there for rebounds and stuff. He only had 4 rebounds today, but again, 2 really big offensive rebounds. One that stood out in the first quarter where he like literally torpedoed himself to get that board. And he's just great with his hands, man. The steals, everything. I mean, leading the fast break, a lot of great stuff from Lowry.
Like, you could tell he was, like, into this game, like, right, I think with, like, 2 minutes into the game when Paul George was switched on him, and I think George got a block on him. He felt he was fouled, but then as soon as the Pacers were resuming play the other way, he came back and got the steal right away. And, I think the Indiana Pacers was like, oh, this guy's up for it as well, the Pacers announcer. And it's just, he's so focused, so zoned in. He doesn't care about his shot. He's looking to assist. Like, this is the Kyle Lowry that we were hoping to see in the playoffs, man. And let's just hope it continues.
Yeah. I mean, there was also one play that really stood out again from the first quarter where the Pacers were making a little bit of a run. They cut into the Raptors' early lead, and Lowry sort of runs up the court, fakes like he's about to take a timeout. Then all of a sudden, Paul George, who's guarding him, relaxes. Lowry blows by Paul George and then finds Bismack Biyombo for a dunk. Yeah. Like, that's just such a brilliant, brilliant play. And, Lowry, he didn't have that great of a shooting game, 8 of 21, still the best in terms of plus 18. He's just absolutely huge. And that second unit with Lowry, as it has been all season, is just humming. It's just humming.
Yeah. Because it's got a lot of defense on there, a lot of three-point shooting. Essentially, the only difference today was instead of Terrence Ross, it was DeMarre Carroll. And Carroll was having a great game, so the lineup looked even better.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the fans that were at the game?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the Raptor fans. So we posted a video on YouTube, and here's kind of what that sounded like.
Get back, and now they switch that, and he just can't guard him. I mean, he's too slow. He's obviously compromised right now. And good call here by Frank Vogel. He's going to give him a hook because Turner, a more mobile, active defender, you put him in two-man game. So good read that time by Lowry taking on the switch.
So that's in Indiana, man. That's in Indiana in a packed Conseco Fieldhouse. You have like Raptor fans who've made the trip down there. Props to them, man. Tickets were pretty cheap. Apparently you had like essentially not courtside but 3 rows up seats going for $250. So if you want to check out a Raptor game close to courtside, man, make the trip down to Indiana. The Raptor Nation, or Raptors Republic, I should say, making a name for themselves on the road because this kind of support, Will, you just don't see for other teams. Like you don't see, like right now there's a Cleveland-Detroit series going on. Yeah, there's some Detroit fans who probably made the trip down to Cleveland, but not in these numbers and not with this kind of impact.
No, I mean it's a great thing to see, and it's something you always hear about, right? Where the Raptors travel well, and you see it sometimes, but to come through loud and clear in the broadcast like that, that is amazing, man. Like, eventually the Pacers fans started booing, but even when they started booing, they couldn't drown out those cheers. Like, you still hear them at the end. Yeah. It's just a great sign to see, man. And it's a great look for free agents too, right? Because like, if you're out of the playoffs right now, what are you doing? You're just watching the games. You notice these things. You're like, oh man, it's Indiana. It's a tough place to play.
It's a whole
not a great place to go to either.
I mean, it's a basketball state, and you're seeing.
That's right. It's a Hoosier state. Yeah.
And
good stuff.
Yeah, it's something like you see in soccer. Like there's always an away crowd, and you always hear them chanting like during away games. And here to see that, in basketball, it's something so rare and beautiful. Will, it's beautiful.
It is nice, and it has none of the shenanigans that goes on in the European traveling sport fandoms.
Hey, one more credit to Dwayne Casey here is that Norman Powell had a great game in Game 2. I posted a clip of his defense against Paul George in Game 2, and Dwayne Casey essentially did not play him in this game because Carroll was going so well. And in the past we've seen him go to a rotation and then stick with that rotation, feast or famine. I think he realized that what's working is working, and he doesn't have to just repeat the rotations from Game 2. And it's not an adjustment. It's just he almost restrained himself on making a move that he might be programmed to make.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Powell, he did play great defense against George for the second half stretch there, but he's still someone who you would think of as a backup option, right? Sure. If DeMarre Carroll picks up 2 fouls, I'm sure you see Norman Powell come in. But the simple fact is DeMarre Carroll is very effective. He was also giving you more offensively than Norman Powell would either. So, look, if Carroll's having a great game, this is it's obviously you want to ride it out. But if he's not, then you have a nice backup. And I think that's the benefit of depth, right? And that's, in the second game, for example, DeMarre Carroll had a horrible defensive game. He picked up 2 fouls within 3 minutes, and that's when you saw Powell come in and save the day. Now there's no day to be saved. Yeah. It was just smooth sailing.
So we enter pivotal Game 4, which is whenever the series is tied 2-1. This is the game to watch here because it goes to 3-1. At that point, the series is over, or it goes to 2-2, and then you got a best of 3 going on. Indiana's going to obviously approach that game as something close to a do or die, because it really is for them. Because you go down 3-1, heading back to Toronto, it's just not happening for you. You're not going to beat us 3 straight times. So it's a must win for them. What possible adjustments can they make to slow us down? Let's start with the bigs, Biyombo, JV. What can they do? They don't have a stretch 4. They don't have a stretch 5. They don't have stretch forward period. What can they do to slow us down?
I think the one thing that you saw Frank Vogel try in the second half was he put Paul George out there as the power forward, along with Mahimni. So he had a 1 big, 3 wing, 1 point guard lineup. Which, on paper, that could hurt the Raptors, but the Pacers have really struggled to defend in that look all season when they've had CJ Miles or Paul George in the lineup. They just can't defend. They can't secure rebounds, which is already a huge problem. And also, they just don't have enough quality wing players that if you take someone like Miles Turner off the court, you don't really have a better wing option to throw in there. I mean, they're throwing in Solomon Hill, who is not much of a player, aside from his defense, which actually hasn't been that great in the series. I don't know. I think the one thing is you saw from Frank Vogel today, he was kind of desperate. He tried a lot of different looks towards the end, and none of them really worked. I mean, the Raptors ultimately cruised to the victory. And I think some of that was a bit unlucky, but also some of that was, I think when Dwayne Casey goes back and looks at the film, he'll realize, okay, look, I left in Luis Scola for way too long, right? And Dwayne Casey makes his adjustment faster to whatever the Pacers are going to do. The Pacers really don't have an adjustment. It's just they're at a talent disadvantage.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying that, the Raptors are guaranteed to win the rest of the series. It's only 2-1. A lot of things could happen, and I thought the Pacers were really sloppy in the first half. They tightened that up in the second half, but there's realistically not a lineup switch that they can really, really do that can really hurt the Raptors.
Yeah,
right now.
From a guard perspective, the only thing I can think of, man, right now is that what they haven't tried is maybe not have George Hill or guard Kyle Lowry, and maybe put a bigger defender on Kyle Lowry to slow him down and take your chances with George Hill or somebody guarding DeMarre Carroll, who's not the greatest offensive player. You could maybe make that switch, and hopefully things might work out. But other than that, other than slowing down Kyle Lowry by putting a bigger guy on him, which has sometimes given him trouble in the past, I don't see what else they can really do. I was thinking when analyzing this series at the start that they might take like one of two games in Indiana, but the way the Raptors dominated today, I have my doubts about that as well. But considering the significance of Game 4, you might see them like basically pull out all the cards and just try anything. And I think those are two things. One thing you mentioned about the bigs and what I said about the guards, that they might be able to slow the Raptors down, but not really, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've run up against this point, and it's actually something Jonas said after practice, on Tuesday, where he said, look, someone else asking him, what adjustment do you think the Pacers are going to make, right? And he said, maybe they send more help towards me, but then maybe that opens up the drive, right? Or if they keep sort of trapping the guards like this, then Jonas keeps getting open for looks. It's just, at the end of the day, they're going to have to give up something, and then this is where the Raptors just hold a talent advantage. So I'm not saying that the Pacers don't have anything, but if they're going to try to do this, like, I think the biggest takeaway is just from the second half when Frank Vogel tried a whole bunch of different things. They tried trapping the pick and roll. They tried sort of blitzing. They tried to switch a lot of stuff. None of that worked. The Raptors just kept scoring, right? So they have no tangible takeaway to go into practice tomorrow and say, okay, this worked against them yesterday. Let's practice this so that we can double down. They kind of have nothing, right? So they have to just think theoretically, okay, this might work, and then hope to practice that, and then hope for that to work. And that's not a guarantee of anything.
Even possessions where Indiana's defending well, like they've spent 16 seconds defending it, and the Raptors don't have much going on for them. The Raptors almost seem to do two things. One, they have Kyle Lowry, who can generate offense against George Hill quite easily, which is surprising because during the regular season, George Hill defended him okay. Like he wasn't getting torn apart. So they have that going for them. And then Corey Joseph seems to carry that Spurs DNA where he can actually run a play with 6 seconds left on the shot clock and still get a good shot for, like the one you mentioned for Patrick Patterson in the fourth quarter. That came on a broken play when he just decided to drive with 5 seconds left. Yep. Last year, that play would have been a Lou Williams pull-up three or a Vasquez heave. Now you got this guy who doesn't panic when you have 6 on the clock and you got a defense in your face. He's calm. He knows how to run. He knows how to execute. So even when the Pacers are playing good defense, they can't close out the possession.
Yeah, and I think that another thing the Raptors have done really well after Game 1 is their offense is been a little more steady. There's a lot more floor balance. So you're not seeing someone shoot a three-pointer when there's 4 guys along the baseline, because as soon as that rebound comes out, you're going to have leak-out opportunities, transition opportunities for the Pacers. The Raptors are doing a better job of running their offense and having sort of systematic, predictable outcomes happen so that the defenders on the court, as soon as the shot goes up, they know, should I chase the rebound? Should I go back on defense? What should I do? They're able to do that a lot better. And that's also why the Pacers have had less transition points. So look, the Raptors have played really well.
Yeah. If you take out DeRozan's 7 for 19, take some of the bad shots that he's taken in the series, including Game 3, can you tell me one other player, what sticks out in your memory that, hey, that was a bad shot, that could have been better? I can't. Right now I'm trying to think back and rewind my mind. I can't think of one. Nothing jumps out at me as a bad shot that was taken by somebody other than DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah, and we don't want to single out DeMar, especially because that's the focus of the Pacers defense. It continues to be the same. You got the best defender on the Pacers, guarding him, but otherwise, like you said, man, everyone else is staying within the system. I mean, Bismack gets the rebound, he knows to kick it out. JV gets the rebound, he knows to kick it out. We reset the offense, you run this motion, and you're starting to see cracks start to form in the Pacers defense. So it's been great, man.
And maybe the strategy from Dwayne Casey is the genius of Dwayne Casey is that he's basically said, you know what, Paul George is an all-NBA defender, and he's going to take out one guy from our team. That's just fact. That's what's going to happen. That's what we got to give up here. And he said, you know what, let that guy be DeMar DeRozan. We don't need DeRozan to win this series, as you alluded to earlier. We can do it without him.
Yeah. And this is something I noted after Game 2, where DeRozan was left on the bench. The Raptors can win the series without DeRozan, and this doesn't mean DeRozan's crap. He's not a bad player at all.
I'm not.
The playoffs is just a matchup game, right? And it just doesn't really make sense to funnel a quarter of your possessions to DeRozan when their whole defense is loaded up to defend DeRozan. So unless DeRozan's going to make the extra pass or really make a huge impact on defense, it doesn't quite make sense. Right, and it's just he's just been matched up it's just not the best matchup for him.
You know what? It's not a best matchup for anybody who's being guarded by Paul George. He is an elite defender, and it would be tough for James Harden if he was going up against Paul George. It would be hard for Klay Thompson. It would be hard for anybody. And this is DeRozan's third playoff, so it's still learning. So before we let you go, Will, quick Game 4 prediction.
I think it's a closer game. I think the Pacers try to tighten up their execution a little bit better on offense, but ultimately I see a similar result. I see like 100 to like, we may not on 100, but like 95 to 90. Yeah. Another victory for the Raptors.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that one. It's very hard to watch this game and see the Pacers making any big adjustments before Game 4. So Raptors take a series 3-1 series lead heading back to Toronto. At least that's what our call is. Listener, thank you for tuning to another post-game podcast. Will, thank you very much. And guys, rate us on iTunes, rate us on Stitcher, and we'll see you again soon after Game 4, which is 3 p.m. on Saturday. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.